After being reborn, the first thing I did was call off my engagement to FLhe. This was because, in my previous life, as soon as I became pregnant, he immediately requested a transfer to the Northwest with his first love, FLhe. In the Northwest, they publicly claimed to be husband and wife, always together wherever they went, traveling all over the country. Meanwhile, I stayed in my hometown, serving my in-laws and raising our child. In the end, when I was on my deathbed, he even complained that my illness was an inconvenience for him to care for me. Even my son, whom I had raised single-handedly, blamed me for making him miss FLhe's birthday. I was so angry that I spat out a mouthful of blood. My body twisted and convulsed, then gradually calmed down before losing all signs of life. To my surprise, the moment I opened my eyes, I found myself back to 1 month before marrying FLhe. Mom, did you do this on purpose? You knew Aunt Chen's birthday is coming up in a few days, yet you chose to fall ill right now, making me miss her celebration. My 35-year-old son, FLhe, had rushed back from the Northwest to see me, covered in dust. Before I even caught a glimpse of him, his complaints echoed through the hospital corridor. I rose from the bed, my heart burning with rage, still reeling from the shock when my son, FLhe, dashed to me like an arrow, followed closely by my husband, FLhe, who was leisurely pulling a suitcase behind him. The father and son were singing the same tune. The older one started by scolding me first. Nora song, how many times have I told you, stop acting like you're on your deathbed every time, yet when we come back, you're tougher than anyone else. When will you grow up a little and stop troubling us with everything? The younger one wasn't to be outdone and chimed in. Exactly, Mom. Do you think Dad and I have nothing better to do in the Northwest? You always say you're at death's door, but every time we come back, aren't you perfectly fine? In the cramped hospital room, I stood pinned against the wall, humbled. The father and son, whom I hadn't seen in a year, didn't even ask about my condition the moment they saw me. With just a flick of their lips, they unleashed a torrent of venomous criticism upon me, as if I weren't a human being, but some beast that forced them to return from the Northwest to take care of. But I clearly have two identities. Broadly speaking, I'm the factory director's wife, and more personally, I'm a mother to a child. How could I possibly be a beast? I closed my eyes and said nothing, a tear silently falling. They didn't see it, and my son even sneered shrilly, Dad, look at Mom. Every time we criticize her, she puts on this world-weary act, making it seem like we've done something terrible to her. What would outsiders think if they saw this? Aunt Chen is educated and knows how to handle things properly. She'd never act like this. I couldn't hold back any longer, watching FLhe speak like a ruthless machine, and then looking at FLhe, who stood by the door, unwilling to take a step closer to me. I said coldly, why don't you just tell me directly that you want FLhe to be your wife, and even more, you want FLhe to be your mother? Why go through such a big circle and say a bunch of nonsense? Mom, Nora. As soon as I finished speaking, both father and son immediately stared at me and exclaimed in unison. My words made them feel as if I had desecrated FLhe. Another round of scorn and abuse is coming my way. I treat it all as nonsense, deaf to their words. Just as they have eyes yet fail to see my patched clothes, unable to hide my emaciated frame, they don't notice my fractured arm, the white bandage still wrapped around my wrist, sending searing pain with every move I make, invisible. No one took care of me in the hospital. I could only take care of myself. The food on the table was leftovers from yesterday. When they were tired of scolding, I had accumulated all my disappointment. I lay heavily on the bed, and the light in my eyes that had been waiting for them to return was gone. Actually, I should have thought of it earlier, shouldn't I? Looking back at my life, it's been truly awful. Less than 2 months into my pregnancy, FLhe was transferred to the Northwest. I stayed in our hometown, left to care for my in-laws and our child alone. After finally seeing my in-laws off, I wanted to take our child to the Northwest to find FLhe, only to discover that he and his ex-girlfriend had been publicly posing as a couple there, always together. I argued, I broke down, but FLhe never ended things with her. Later, I came to a realization, let him be with whoever he wants. Anyway, I have my son with me, and I'll raise him well. When he gets married and has children, and my grandchildren play around me, I'll consider my life well lived. But I never expected that after my son graduated from college, FLhe took him to work in the Northwest, and he also sided with his father. During his visit home, My son kept talking about how good Clara Chen was and showed me nothing but disdain. Mom, please don't dress like a beggar all day in patched clothes. Okay, Auntie Chen is always clean and tidy. Your hands are so black and dirty. I don't want you to serve me food. Can you please be more hygienic? Auntie Chen isn't like you, throwing bones around when she eats. I never imagined that Clara Chen had such power. Not only did she steal my husband, but now she wants to steal my son too, in an instant. All my anger, resentment, and shame were magnified, raw and boundless, and touching any one of them would have led to my utter ruin. But my son, just like his father, has never had a heart. Even though his previous words had already caused me enough pain and embarrassment, he still had to twist the knife in my heart. No wonder Dad didn't want to take you to the Northwest. You're so dirty. Taking you out would only make Dad lose face, unlike Aunt Chen, who brings Dad honor when he takes her out. I couldn't hold back any longer and had a huge argument with him. The next day, he left without even saying goodbye. I haven't been in contact with them for over 2 years. If it weren't for this surgery I need due to my illness, which requires their signature, I wouldn't have asked them to come back. I ignored them and coldly issued the order to leave. I'm having surgery the day after tomorrow. Once you've signed the papers, you can go. As soon as I finished speaking, Troy Lu barely even heard what I said and immediately blurted out, "Can you stop making a scene? Clara is just a friend. You always talk about her like this. And it's going to cause misunderstandings." Suddenly, Troy Lu's voice trailed off, and he stared at my face with disbelief. "What did you just say? You're sick and need surgery. What kind of illness is that serious?" Over 55 years old, his well-defined features had shed their youthful freshness, gaining maturity and steadiness. Now, as the factory boss, he exuded natural authority even when silent. Time seemed to have left no trace on his face. Unlike me, who worked myself ragged day and night, at just 50, I already looked like a 90-year-old woman. Troy Lu quickly read my medical record, his handsome brows suddenly furrowing. I wonder how much of that frown was genuine. However, I stopped caring a long time ago. My son took my medical record and looked at it. Also reining in his aggressive demeanor from earlier, a hint of concern appeared in his eyes as he looked at me. "Mom, what did the doctor say?" "I'm tired, I'm going to sleep." I lay on my side, tears silently streaming from the corners of my eyes. The father and son stayed in the hospital room for a while, and thinking I was asleep, they got up and started to leave. But before they had completely exited the room, my son said to Troy Lu, "Dad, Mom has such strong opinions about Aunt Chen. Maybe we shouldn't tell her about my wedding." Troy Lu immediately replied, "Of course, I wasn't planning on having her attend your wedding anyway." My son's voice suddenly dropped. "When Mom finds out I'm marrying Aunt Chen's daughter, will she make a fuss? Then don't let her know." What did you say?" I sprang up from the bed like a slingshot, staring intently at them. "Who did you just say you're going to marry?" "You're going to marry Clara Chen's daughter, aren't you?" Troy Lu was about to speak, but my son interjected. "That's right, next month is our wedding day. Dad and I have already discussed it. The wedding will be held in the Northwest. By then." "I disagree." I practically screamed the words with all my might. "I absolutely will not agree to you marrying the mistress's daughter." My son's eyes bulged with anger. In his eyes was a coldness I had never seen before. "Mom, marriage freedom is advocated now. My affairs are not for you to decide. Also, let me say it again. Aunt Chen and Dad are completely innocent. Their friendship is sincere. They are not as dirty as you imagine. If I hear you say that again, then when you're old, I won't take care of you." Troy Lu didn't stop him from saying these words. It was clear that he thought the same way. I was so angry that I couldn't catch my breath, and then I spat out a mouthful of blood. My body contorted, and I writhed in pain on the bed. The father and son turned pale with fright and quickly called for doctors and nurses, but before they could arrive, I stopped breathing. They stood motionless like statues for a long time. I thought my death had awakened their conscience and made them feel guilty towards me, but what they really thought was, if I died, my son's wedding would have to be postponed. Father and son, if not beasts, then what are they? I'm not reconciled, so unreconciled, if there's another life. I'll never marry Troy Lu and live this kind of life again. Don't be so foolish as to silently endure the humiliation. Instead, retaliate fiercely, unexpectedly. Heaven heard my plea and granted me rebirth, sending me back to the month before my marriage to Troy Lu. I was sitting by the window, Looking at my 20-year-old self in the mirror, my features were soft, my skin fair and rosy, and my lips naturally red, not the kind of strikingly beautiful features that catch the eye at first glance, but the kind of face that all the neighbors praised as the most blessed and fortunate. It took me a moment to realize. I had been reborn, returned to this very day, May 9th, 1980. At this moment, there was just 1 month left before my wedding to Troy Lu. Like an arrow, I dashed out of the courtyard, rushed to the factory, and found Director Xiao to retrieve the marriage approval date Troy Lu had submitted. Troy Lu just came to tell me that you're getting married next month. And now you're taking it back. What's wrong, Comrade Song? Is it that Comrade Lu hasn't passed your test yet? Director Xiao was a bit confused, but still gave it to me. I was out of breath, quickly took a breath, and found an excuse. No, it's my grandma in the countryside who thinks this date isn't well chosen. She wants to look at it again. My parents were old employees of the steel factory. They both passed away in an accident. My only living relative was my grandma, who farmed in the countryside. When Director Xiao heard that my grandma was unhappy with the arrangement, he didn't dare say much. He just told me to go back and discuss it with her slowly before making a decision. As a girl's marriage is a lifelong matter and shouldn't be taken lightly, I thanked Director Xiao, walked out of his office, and tore up the report, throwing it into the ditch. The shredded paper disappeared with the current. And I went to the clinic across from the steel factory to find Aunt Zhong. Aunt Zhong, last time you said you'd take me to the secret base next month to study medicine. And I agreed. Aunt Zhong had just finished dispensing medicine for a patient when I walked in and said something so nonsensical. She paused for a moment before realizing what I was talking about. Aunt Zhong was happy, but quickly reined it in. But aren't you getting married to Comrade Lu next month? How can you go then? No. I'm not getting married. The engagement is off. Aunt Zhong was startled. What? I looked at Aunt Zhong, my gaze more resolute than ever. Aunt Zhong, Troy Lu is not a good man. I don't want him. Aunt Zhong saw that I wasn't joking and nodded. If you don't want him, then don't. You deserve better. I'll apply to take you there in a moment. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Aunt Zhong is my mother's best friend. She delayed her marriage because she loved to study medicine. So she simply didn't marry and treated me like her own daughter. Last time, when I came to tell her that I was going to marry Troy Lu, she told me that this world is already harsh on women, and advised me to at least learn a skill to support myself before getting married, so that I would have enough confidence to deal with various life changes in the future. At that time, I didn't listen to her advice and we parted on bad terms. I thought she didn't want to talk to me anymore. Unexpectedly, she wasn't angry with me and still kept that rare spot for me. I looked at Aunt Zhong, incredibly grateful. Aunt Zhong, I won't let you down. After leaving Aunt Zhong's clinic, I went to work at my clerk position. This job was arranged by the factory for me after my parents passed away. The work wasn't much, and the pay was good. But in my previous life, after marrying Troy Lu, I became pregnant in less than 2 months. Troy Lu, considering how hard I worked, told me to quit my job and stay home to prepare for childbirth. But a few days later, he applied for a transfer to a factory in the northwest, leaving me, heavily pregnant, in the south. Pregnant, I had to take care of myself and his parents. That I'm still alive after all the trouble his parents caused me is truly a blessing from my ancestors. At 5 in the evening, I got off work and went home. I used my meat ration coupons to buy a crucian carp, 2 blocks of tofu, a rack of ribs, and a bunch of greens at the market. I planned to make tofu fish soup and salt and pepper ribs to treat myself. As soon as I got back to the compound, I ran into Troy Lu's parents, who were just about to leave. I lowered my eyes and cursed under my breath. How unlucky, considering that Troy Lu and I were engaged. The leader arranged for us to live in the same compound, in different houses, so we could look out for each other. But as soon as I moved in, Troy Lu brought his parents from the countryside to live with him. Nora, I get off work late in the evening and don't have time to look after them. You get off work early and cook. Just make an extra bowl for them. They're not picky and are very easy to get along with. But the first time I saw them, I felt they wouldn't be easy to get along with. And it turned out I was right. I come home from work, and they don't see me. They only see the groceries in my hands. If there's meat, they're all smiles. If there's no meat, they start making sarcastic remarks, saying I'm already mistreating them before even marrying into the family. And if I do, wouldn't I make them beg for food? They even raised their voices louder and louder, drawing the attention of everyone in the courtyard. In my past life, I was too thin-skinned and, considering they were Troy Lu's parents, didn't argue with them. Instead, I used my precious meat ration coupons, the ones I'd been saving for myself, to buy meat for them every day. It really was just for them to eat. By the time I finished cooking all the dishes in the kitchen and came out, the plate of meat was already gone. Not even a drop of sauce left. Even worse, after they finished eating, they just got up and left, leaving the dishes for me to clean up. At that time, I was extremely love-struck and even comforted myself, thinking that once Troy Lu and I got married and sent them back to the countryside, we wouldn't see them many times a year, and everything would be fine. But who would have thought that I would later live a life worse than a beggar's? Now that I saw them again, my face was terribly gloomy, but before I could speak, they stared straight at the dishes in my hand, and when they saw fish and ribs, their eyes immediately lit up. Old Lady Lu reached out to take the dishes. "Nora, let me see what dishes you bought. You've worked hard all day, why don't I cook today?" "Oh, do I not know what she's up to? As long as there's meat, she wants to stir-fry it, and once she does, she'll secretly eat more than half of it herself." In my previous life, when I gave birth to my son and was in confinement, a few good comrades brought me some chickens to help me recover. Every time she cooked for me, she and father-in-law would eat all the meat, leaving me with only half a bowl of soup and 2 chicken feet. As soon as I said anything to her, she would immediately make a scene, drawing the attention of the neighbors. Later, I realized that she was taking advantage of my timid nature, knowing I wouldn't speak up and would just silently endure it. That's why she always knew how to push my buttons and bully me. If I was a little slow cooking, she'd curse, saying I wanted to starve them. If I was slow washing clothes, she'd say I was lazy and didn't want to work. Troy Lu sent money back, and they wanted every penny of it. If I wanted to use even a cent, it was harder than climbing to heaven. When the kids threw a tantrum, they wouldn't help me calm them down. Instead, they'd yell at me for not knowing how to raise children. I often had to take care of the kids while doing various chores, and I always had to be at their beck and call. I was so exhausted that I developed a hunchback before I was 40, like an old woman. In this life, I will never endure their abuse again. I quickly took 3 steps back with the vegetables. "I won't trouble you, old Mrs. Lu's face changed, but she quickly said, "All right, then go cook quickly. Your dad Lu and I are starving. When you're ready, just call us. We'll go back to the house first." I coldly shattered her wishful thinking. "These are vegetables I bought myself. When I cook later, you won't get any. If you want to eat, go buy your own." The two of them froze, and it took them a while to realize what I had said. Suddenly, Old Man Lu's face turned fierce, and he glared at me. Old Lady Lu, as usual, let out a loud wail and began her excellent performance. "Oh, my poor old life. My future daughter-in-law hasn't even entered the door yet, and now she's already despising me. I'm afraid I won't have a good life in the future." People in the compound heard the noise and immediately pushed open their windows to look at us. In my previous life, whenever I encountered such a scene, I would shut up and remain silent, letting her say whatever she wanted without arguing with her. Soon, I gained the notorious reputation of mistreating my in-laws. Slowly, no one wanted to associate with me anymore, but this time, I raised my voice and retorted, "Are you so eager for me to serve you? Am I married to your son now? Or are you so old and immobile, with broken hands and feet, that you can't even cook a meal?" When the people in the compound heard this, they realized it was true. They were already expecting their future daughter-in-law to serve them before she even married into the family. Once she married in, wouldn't they just lie in bed and expect her to bring them their bedpans? Besides, the meat coupons weren't even theirs. Where did they get the nerve to ask someone else to cook the food and then invite them to eat it? Everyone in the compound looked at Troy Lu's parents with disdain, but they've always been thick-skinned and shameless, so they wouldn't care about that. What they cared about was that I didn't intend to share the groceries I bought today with them, which infuriated them. "The meat coupons you used to buy this meat were all given by my son. Why don't I get a share? Hand over the meat, or I won't let you off." The old woman Lu reached out to snatch the meat from me, but I quickly dodged to the side, causing her to miss and fall to the ground. "Ouch, that hurts so much." The old woman Lu cried out in pain. "Old woman, are you okay? Are you hurt?" Old Man Lu hurried over to her. His hands, which were about to help her up, suddenly changed direction toward my groceries, attempting to grab them from me. Damn, that's shameless. I casually picked up a bamboo slat nearby and smacked it hard on the back of his hand. Slap, a crisp sound rang out, leaving everyone dumbfounded. None of them expected someone who looked as gentle as me to go full-on tiger mode and strike my future father-in-law. Old man Lou clutched his swollen, throbbing hand. Glaring at me with eyes wide in fury, he tried several times to come at me but retreated upon seeing the bamboo slat in my hand, pushing old lady Lou forward instead to curse and scold me. Old Mrs. Lou threatened me. Nora, let me tell you, whether you like it or not, you're cooking this meal for us today. Otherwise, I'll have Troy break off the engagement with you. Your reputation will be ruined. And who would dare marry you then? No need to trouble yourself to call him. When he returns, I'll personally end it with him. Seeing that I wasn't joking, both of them felt a sudden heaviness in their hearts. They racked their brains but couldn't figure out what had gone wrong with me, at which point, just 2 weeks ago, I would grant their every request, treating them like revered deities. Now, no matter whether what I say is true or not, they don't dare to provoke me. After all, I'm easy to handle and have a good job. The kind of daughter-in-law you can't find even with a lantern. No matter how angry they are, they'll have to wait until I'm married into the family before they can properly deal with me. I could see their scheming clearly, then returned to my own room to cook. When I finished cooking the salt and pepper pork ribs and brought them to the table, Troy Lou followed the scent back home. At just 22 years old, he had been promoted from an ordinary worker to workshop supervisor today due to his outstanding performance at the factory. Yet he wasn't happy. At that time, I thought he wasn't very satisfied with being promoted to this position, so I didn't think much of it. Later, I found out that his ex-girlfriend Clara Chen's husband had passed away, and she returned with their child. She even went to the factory to look for him. But no one knows what Clara Chen said to Troy Lou. But when Clara Chen left, someone saw Troy Lou rushing like a madman to find Director Xiao, only to hear from a comrade that Director Xiao was away on a business trip. He quickly rushed into his office and rummaged through everything, but couldn't find what he was looking for. In frustration, he punched the wall. The next day, when I ran into this comrade on the road and he told me about it, I only thought that Troy Lou was dissatisfied with the organization's arrangement for Clara Chen. After all, Clara Chen married a military officer who was stationed in the capital. No matter how the organization tried to arrange things, there was no way they could place Clara Chen in our poor, run-down city. I just never expected that it was Clara Chen who chose to come back on her own. Upon hearing her desire to stay here long-term, Troy Lou immediately dismissed the idea of marrying me. In the previous life, before Director Xiao went on a business trip, he had already submitted their proposed wedding date to the superiors for marriage leave approval. Troy Lou returned empty-handed and kept giving me the cold shoulder, as if I had forced him into marriage. In this life, just like before, he brought back the approved wedding leave date only to find it futile again. But this time I'll make sure everyone gets what they want. Troy Lou fetched water from the well to wash his face, but instead of returning to his own room, he came to mine first. After we moved here, every day after work, Troy Lou would come to my place for dinner before going back to his own room. I served the fish soup and tofu soup, but Troy Lou glanced at them with a dark expression, didn't even greet me, and went straight to the kitchen to get a bowl for his rice. I noticed he only took his own bowl and didn't bring one for me. I immediately cursed myself. How blind could I have been in my past life to fall for such a selfish person who kept feeding me empty promises? Troy Lou had just served himself rice and was about to eat when I slapped his chopsticks away, coldly saying, "Don't eat. This meal isn't for you today." Troy Lou's face darkened with anger, but before he could explode, I cut straight to the point. "I've taken back the leave application for the marriage registration. We're not getting married." Troy Lou suddenly looked up at me, unable to hide the joy in his eyes, as if confirming whether what I said was true, but soon he pretended to be deeply affectionate toward me and said, "Nora, what are you talking about? Have I not done enough for you? Do you feel that I..." Not wanting to hear him continue, I quickly interrupted, "We're not a good match. I've already promised Aunt Zhong that I'll go with her next month to secretly study medicine. We won't be back for at least 5 years. I calmly finished speaking and went to get a bowl to serve myself rice, quickly helping myself to the dishes and meat. After all, this was bought with my ration coupons. No way was I letting him benefit from it. Troy Lu remained frozen in his previous posture, as if unable to accept being abandoned by me. But the joy slowly spreading across his face had long betrayed him. However, he truly is an utterly despicable scumbag. Even after I'd gone this far, he still had the audacity to say, "Nora, 5 years isn't that long. I can wait. No, I don't think we're right for each other. It's better to end things early." Troy Lu and I were introduced by a mutual gay friend. At the time, we both thought the other was decent, so we decided to give it a try. We were together for 2 years. He wasn't a difficult person to get along with. Sometimes, knowing I worked late, he'd prepare dinner and wait for me to come home so we could eat together. When it rained, he'd bring me an umbrella. If I was sick, he'd buy me medicine. On holidays, he'd use his meat ration coupons to make special dishes for me. And he even gave me clothes as gifts. Over the course of 2 years together, I genuinely fell in love with him. At the time, I thought he felt the same way. Only later did I realize that Clara Chen got married. It didn't matter to him who he married. That's why, after marriage, he treated me with nothing but disdain and impatience. But for a moment, I really wanted to say yes, tell him to wait for me, and then watch the joy on his face slowly crack, replaced by an ugly, twisted expression. But what I truly want to see is how happy he and Clara Chen will be this time, now that I'm no longer there to stand in their way. And they can be together much sooner. Troy Lu looked at me, about to say something more, when his parents hurried toward us from inside, bowls and chopsticks in hand. I quickly shooed him away. "Hurry up and go, I need to find Aunt Zhong for something." Before his parents came in, I quickly put the dishes on the table into the cupboard. Then, under Troy Lu's stunned gaze, I snatched the bowl and chopsticks from his hands and put them away as well. Seeing him still not moving, I impatiently said, "You and your parents wouldn't be so shameless as to snatch this little bit of food from me, would you?" Troy Lu looked at me with an expression as if he'd seen a ghost, completely unable to comprehend how I could turn hostile so suddenly. "Even if we've broken up, you don't have to turn your back on me like this, do you?" I said coldly and heartlessly. "Yes, I do. You and your hard-to-please parents should leave quickly. Don't bring bad luck to this house anymore." "Nora," Troy Lu stood up, his eyes wide with fury. "Watch your words. What have my parents ever done to you? How could you say such things about them? In my past life, because I loved him, whenever he called me by my full name, I would quickly lose my nerve and not dare to say another word. But in this life, I met his gaze without a trace of fear. Are you leaving or not? If you don't go now, I'll grab a broom to chase you out." As soon as I finished speaking, Troy Lu's parents had already arrived at the doorstep. The old Mrs. Lu picked up the broom by the door and roared, ready to hit me. "You wretch, how dare you talk to my son like that? I'll slap you silly." The broom in her hand was raised high, about to land on me, when Troy Lu suddenly reached out and grabbed it. After glancing at me, he pulled his parents outside. His mother was a real shrew, seeing that she couldn't hit me. She started spewing all sorts of vile and offensive words. Her tantrums made Troy Lu so agitated that he shouted at her, "Mom, watch your language. If you keep spouting nonsense like this, I'll send you back to the countryside immediately, and you won't be allowed to come here again." In my past life, before Troy Lu was transferred to the Northwest, when the old Mrs. Lu gave me a hard time, he wouldn't say a single word to reprimand her. He would just tell me to endure it and wait for them to return to the countryside. Little did I know, as I kept enduring, I got pregnant, and he immediately applied for a transfer to the Northwest. I wanted to go with him, but he said the Northwest was cold and not as good as home, especially since I was pregnant. If I got sick from the change of environment, I'd suffer greatly. He told me to stay here for a while, and he'd come back to pick me up later, but I waited 30 years. And he never kept his promise. In the end, I could only follow his parents back to the countryside to raise the child. It was the first time old Mrs. Lu had seen Troy Lu so angry, and she immediately didn't dare to say anything. As she left, she glared at me fiercely. I spat at her, which made her face turn green with anger, and she started to lash out at me. Troy Lu pulled her away. "Mom, starting today, I'm breaking off the engagement with her. She's no longer my fiancé. You won't have to go to her house and be annoying anymore." The two of them were stunned for a moment, about to say something. When Troy Lu told them he had been promoted, the two of them cheered excitedly. "Son, what position have you been promoted to?" "Director." "Oh my, our ancestors must be blessing us." Old Mrs. Lu looked at me with an air of superiority and said without hesitation, "Son, I've long disliked this ungrateful woman who doesn't respect her elders. It's good that the engagement is off, I'll find you a better match later." Lu didn't say anything. As soon as they left, I quickly brought the dishes back out to eat. The salt and pepper ribs were so flavorful, and the fish soup was incredibly fresh. Isn't it better for me to eat alone? Why should we let that heartless dog off cheaply? The next day, news of my broken engagement with Lu spread throughout the compound. It was old lady Lu who started spreading the word. She told everyone she met that I was disrespectful and vicious to elders, and that such a wicked woman wasn't fit to be her daughter-in-law. But anyone with eyes could see the problem lay with them, not with me. Seeing old lady Lu's words getting increasingly outrageous, everyone in the compound couldn't help but snap back at her. With her shrewish mouth, she argued fiercely with the crowd until her face turned red, yet she still couldn't outshout them, perhaps driven mad with rage. She actually resorted to hitting them. Who among those living in this compound could possibly be of simple status? When Lu rushed back upon hearing the news, old lady Lu had already scratched the faces of the two elderly aunties, drawing blood. Upon recognizing who these two aunties were, Lu was nearly scared to death on the spot. It must be said, old lady Lu really knew how to pick her targets. The sons of these two women held higher positions than Lu. Lu took them to the hospital, groveling like a dog in front of them, begging them not to tell their sons. The two old aunties looked at him with utter contempt and, of course, ignored his pleas, quickly calling their sons instead. When the two aunties' sons arrived and saw their mothers beaten up like this, they immediately erupted in anger at Lu right there in the hospital. Lu hung his head like a scolded child, not daring to utter a single word. This incident had a significant impact, and Lu was immediately demoted back to being a regular employee. In recent years, any hope of him getting promoted again seems unlikely. After returning from the hospital, Lu even scolded his parents like they were worthless. However, his parents still don't think they did anything wrong, insisting they did it all for Lu's sake. They said shifting all the blame onto me was the only way to protect his reputation. Lu found them utterly unreasonable and decided to send them back to the countryside. They refused and smashed all the pots and pans in the house. Lu stormed out in anger, slamming the door behind him. For several days in a row, Lu didn't return home. His parents were just two illiterate farmers who were used to bullying others in the village, and no one dared to stand up to them. Now that they had moved to the city, they still thought they could continue their domineering ways as before, but Lu simply stopped coming home. Only then did they panic, but they had no idea where to look for him. They had managed to offend everyone in the entire compound. They wanted to ask around, but as soon as people saw them coming, they immediately shut their doors. If they dare to knock on the door, just say you'll call the police. Only then did they get scared and think of me. I'm fiercer than the other comrades. If they dare to show up at my doorstep, I'll immediately grab a broom and go out. If they provoke me, I'll just start swinging. Old man Lu has seen how fiercely I swung at him before, so he was so scared he dragged old lady Lu away. Lu didn't return home until half a month later, and with him came Clara Chen and her 3-year-old daughter, Hua Hui. Perhaps because of the incident where Lu didn't come home, the two old stubborn ones were scared. When Lu proposed to marry Clara Chen, they didn't dare to say anything anymore, but only I knew. It wasn't that they didn't dare to say anything, rather, they were waiting for Clara Chen to enter the household before slowly dealing with her. However, Lu is on Clara Chen's side, so his parents probably wouldn't dare to discipline him. These matters were told to me by Aunt Liu next door. In the entire compound, she was the one who stood up for me the most. That vixen has nothing going for her except for her big chest. I don't know what Comrade Lu sees in her. I smiled and said, maybe it's precisely because she has nothing going for her. Aunt Liu was taken aback for a moment, then continued to scold Clara Chen. Aunt Liu wouldn't listen to my explanations. She always believed it was Clara Chen's interference that caused Lu and me to break up. Clara Chen came to Lu's parents' house every day with her daughter. Despite never having done housework before, she even cooked for them personally. When we ran into each other while grocery shopping, I cursed my bad luck silently in my heart, but she approached me with clear hostility. In my previous life, I learned that Troy Lu was known as her husband in the Northwest when she took advantage of his business trip to secretly return from the Northwest with a photo album to flaunt it in front of me, that thick photo album. Starting from the year Troy Lu was transferred to the Northwest, documented the footprints of him and Clara Chen, almost covering every corner of the country, with each photo of the two intimately embracing. My heart felt as if it was being stabbed deeper by a knife, until I finally saw Troy Lu's inscription, "The love of my life." Overwhelmed with rage, I spat out a mouthful of blood. Clara Chen, seeing that she had achieved her goal, immediately put away the photos, cursed her bad luck, and walked away. I lay on the ground, like a chicken with its throat slit, barely clinging to life. If it hadn't been for Aunt Lee next door who saw me, I would have frozen to death in the deep winter night that year. Now, Clara Chen, wearing a lotus pink dress with three-quarter sleeves, was even more stunningly beautiful than before, and even more malicious. "I heard that you and Troy called off the engagement, and it was you who initiated it. That means my involvement didn't cause your breakup. Please don't go around spreading rumors and tarnishing my and Troy's reputation." I spat and cursed. A two-legged toad like Troy Lu is a dime a dozen on the streets. Just mentioning his last name brings me bad luck. Only you would treat him like a treasure. To me, he's not even worth a piece of shit. As luck would have it, Troy Lu happened to return just as I finished saying this. Seeing this, Clara Chen quickly pouted her lips, her eyes welling up with tears as she rushed over to hit me. "Shut up, I won't allow you to talk about Troy like that." As she was about to lunge at me, I quickly dodged, hoping to make her fall flat on her face, but I didn't get my wish. Troy Lu swiftly caught her in his arms, his face dark with anger as he glared at me, not concerned about what happened to his little darling. Instead, he gritted out through clenched teeth, "In your heart, I'm not even worth a pile of shit." "Fine, Nora. I'd like to see, now that you've broken off our engagement, just who else would ever want a venomous woman like you." I rolled my eyes hard. No matter how bad I am, I don't need to marry a second-hand man and become a stepmother. Troy Lu was so furious he wanted to hit me, but Aunt Liu timely pulled me behind her. "Did Nora say anything wrong about you? If you were any good, would you marry a second-hand woman and take on a burden? Could it be that you have some physical problem and can't have kids, so you're just picking up someone else's? Thank goodness Nora saw through you early and didn't jump into this fire pit of yours. Or who knows how much she'd be bullied by you and your parents." Troy Lu was left choking on his anger but didn't dare offend Aunt Liu. He had no choice but to storm off with Clara Chen in a rage. I quickly went out to find Director Xiao. "Didn't Clara Chen say I ruined the reputations of Troy Lu and her? If not now, then when?" I exaggerated to Director Xiao, saying they were shameless, engaging in inappropriate relationships before even breaking off the engagement with me. The current atmosphere is one of the strictest enforcement. The next day, the factory authorities immediately sent people to visit Troy Lu's home. As soon as they pushed open the door and entered their courtyard, the three comrades were instantly dumbfounded. Good heavens, they couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. At Troy Lu's home, Troy Lu's parents had taken Clara Chen's daughter out to play. Troy Lu was about to leave for work when he saw Clara Chen cooking in the kitchen, wearing a tight-fitting dress, unable to restrain himself. The two ended up getting intimate right there in the kitchen early in the morning. The three staff members turned pale and immediately turned around to leave without even entering, still caught up in the moment. The two were left bewildered. Before Troy Lu could recall who these three people were, he dashed after them without even properly dressing. However, no matter how he tried to justify it, the fact that he slept with another woman less than half a month after breaking off our engagement was utterly indefensible. The factory deemed Troy Lu's character highly questionable and demoted him from being a regular employee, assigning him directly to sweeping duties. When Troy Lu's parents returned and learned of the incident, they were so furious that they slapped Clara Chen, calling her a seductress and a jinx before kicking her out. The work assignment from Clara Chen hasn't come through yet, and she doesn't want to go back to the dormitory arranged for her here. Troy Lu had no choice but to pay out of his own pocket to rent a place for her. When Troy Lu's parents found out, regardless of whether she was the apple of Troy Lu's eye, each grabbed a broom and went to confront her. They struck hard. By the time Troy Lu got the news and rushed over, Clara Chen was already lying on the ground, bruised and battered. Troy Lu, witnessing this scene, was like an enraged lion. berating his parents mercilessly before sending them back to the countryside overnight. He even declared he would never have anything to do with them again. Clara Chen and her daughter were taken back to the compound by Troy Lu. After the factory sent people to investigate their home last time, Troy Lu seemed to have given up on formalities and started living with Clara Chen without any engagement or wedding ceremony. The two settled into a traditional arrangement, the man working outside and the woman managing the household, finally restoring the compound to its former peaceful days. But it wasn't long before the noise started again, and it nearly even cost someone their life. However, without his manhood, a man might as well be dead. The first time I met Clara Chen, I could tell from her phoenix eyes that she was never one to stay within the bounds of propriety, and sure enough, she wasn't. That day, while Troy Lu was at work, she actually invited a man into the house. Before long, the sound of blushing and heart-pounding could be heard from inside. "Little minx, tell me, who treats you better, Troy Lu or me?" "Of course, it's you." "Is that so?" "Exactly. Troy Lu is just so dull. If it weren't for his money, I would have kicked him to the curb long ago." Troy Lu, who was on his way to work, came back halfway to get some documents and overheard the conversation inside the house. He immediately flew into a rage, grabbed a kitchen knife, and stormed into the room. The two were so frightened that they rolled off the bed without even putting on clothes. Clara Chen knew it was over and quickly shifted all the blame onto the man. Troy Lu kicked her away and immediately raised his knife, chopping off the man's genitals. The man let out a blood-curdling scream before passing out. Clara Chen was also trembling in fear. Troy Lu picked up the kitchen knife and walked toward her, but just as he was about to act, 3 figures burst into the room and subdued him, dragging him back to the police station. He was arrested on suspicion of intentional assault. The man who had been fooling around with Clara Chen turned out to be someone of considerable influence. While awaiting trial, Troy Lu was beaten severely every day by people sent to his cell. When the day of the trial finally arrived, Troy Lu never made it to the courtroom. He was beaten to death before he could stand before the judge. By the time Troy Lu's parents received the news and arrived, they were hunched over, their hair turned white overnight, completely drained of spirit. Clara Chen felt she could no longer stay there and returned with her daughter, but they mysteriously disappeared on the train, and no one knew where they had gone. It wasn't until 3 years later, when her body was discovered at the border, that people realized she had been trafficked. Her daughter remains missing to this day. After that, I devoted myself wholeheartedly to studying medicine under Aunt Zhong and stopped paying attention to such matters. After all, I'm now the director of a hospital, with plenty of responsibilities. Who has time to bother with such trivial affairs?